Alright, hi everyone. Welcome to part 2 of my video on the history of hard rock and heavy metal music. Now, where I last left off, I was talking, or about to talk, about Alice Cooper. Now, Alice Cooper came out with his first album in 1969. The album, was like a hard psychedelic rock album. Didn't really do too well. And he then came out with more albums in the early to mid 70s that did do well. And had a lot of, hit songs on them like School's Out, No More Mr. Nice Guy, I'm 18, Billion Dollar Babies, all those Alice Cooper classics that all the fans, know and love. And Alice Cooper was also known for his live show. He had a real elaborate live show. He even brought magician James Randi along with him to add like illusions and stuff. So, really did a lot of cool stuff on stage with his live show and all that. And, fans really liked it, and he put a lot of money into it. And really, in a lot of ways, you can say he definitely contributed to the image of heavy metal. He had the face paint, he had the dark kind of horror imagery. So added a lot of that kind of imagery. And what most people do not know of Alice Cooper is that there's actually two bands there. There's the Alice Cooper Group. That ended in 1974. After that, you then have Alice Cooper's solo project. And Alice Cooper's solo project began in 75 and continues to the present time. And still around, to this day, still putting on great shows. Definitely, I hope to see him one of these days. I have not seen Alice Cooper yet. It's definitely a band I do want to see. Put on these great live shows, and I would say, Alice Cooper was really part of, the big four of early heavy metal. You have Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Alice Cooper. Those four that really contributed to the sound of hard rock and heavy metal music. And, after that, you started to get, like I said, even more stuff coming out. One band that you had that I would like to mention is the band Budgie. They're, in my opinion, the king of the obscure bands. A lot of people have not heard of them, but they're a great band nonetheless. One album I recommend by them would be 1974's In for the Kill. In fact, Van Halen actually used to play the title track, at their shows in the early days. But, Metallica also, covered a couple songs, Crash Course in Brain Surgery and Bread Fan. But if you haven't heard that band, I definitely recommend going to check them out. The band sort of fell apart a little when Tony Burge left the band. They never were really able to regroup, because Tony Burge was a guitarist who was really responsible, I think, for a lot of their sound. And their sound, they sounded a lot like a combination of Black Sabbath and Rush. In my opinion, they're actually better than Rush, but, that's my opinion. So, moving right along, in addition to, obscure bands, and you had quite a few coming out at the time, another one I want to talk about. And this is definitely a very underrated band of the 1970s, and that would be UFO. UFO started out like, a hard psychedelic rock band. They had Mick Bolton as the guitarist, played on the first two albums. Second album had a lot of long drawn out kind of guitar, jam kind of tracks, which, I love that kind of stuff. I really do. But, they kind of wanted to move away from that as bands were starting to move away from that around 1970. Bands were starting to kind of move away and to kind of pull their music out of psychedelia around 1974. And that's, what UFO did when they put out the album Phenomenon and got a new guitarist of Michael Schenker. Now, Michael Schenker is an incredible guitar player, very underrated. If you haven't heard his stuff, definitely check it out. It was probably all over YouTube. You could hear his playing. Played on the first Scorpions album, and actually had more of like a psychedelic rock sound on the first Scorpions album. You could even hear a strong Tony Iommi influence on his playing. Then after that, kind of changed his sound a bit when he joined UFO, and he really became known for his lead guitar playing. Another guy who would be known for his lead guitar playing was Ritchie Blackmore as well. So a lot of these guys in these later metal bands that became popular in the 80s, especially the lead guitar players, were real big fans of like Michael Schenker and Ritchie Blackmore. And Ritchie Blackmore, around the mid-70s, kind of was starting to sort of a falling out with the guys in Deep Purple. He became increasingly more difficult to work with. They've often said that I think he was getting kind of bored with the music because he wanted Deep Purple to kind of center around his guitar playing more, and the other guys didn't really want that. So he began to become disinterested in the whole band. So he left and formed the band Rainbow. And the singer that he got for Rainbow was the singer of the band Elf. Now, Elf had frequently supported Deep Purple in a lot of shows. They were the opening act. And the singer of Elf was none other than Ronnie James Dio. And Ronnie James Dio, again, an awesome singer. You're going to hear me sing a lot of praise for a lot of these, musicians, because I am, a huge fan of this stuff. So Ronnie James Dio, was, in my opinion, also in the top 5 of greatest singers of all time. And with, Rainbow, they really added that whole, sort of medieval aspect to the music. They kind of brought that to hard rock and heavy metal, because as far as I can tell, you really didn't have that kind of thing before Rainbow. But then Rainbow added that whole medieval element to the music, and in some ways they're kind of Rainbow's kind of regarded as the first power metal band, and I could see where they would say that because they do have some power metal elements, the fantasy lyrics, some sci-fi lyrics, definitely things you would see in power metal a lot. A lot of harmonies in the music. So, yeah, I could see where, people would say that. Then, what happened was, Dio actually didn't last in Rainbow for too long. And, after the third album, he was kind of booted out of the band by Ritchie Blackmore, because Ritchie Blackmore, I guess, kind of wanted to go in more of a commercial direction. So Dio got booted out. They brought Graham Bonnet in, and Dio was then without a band. And at the same time, Ozzy had just recently left Black Sabbath. So Black Sabbath, coincidentally, was without a singer, and, Dio went and, tried out for the band. They were really impressed with what he brought to it, and they put out the album Heaven and Hell. Now, Heaven and Hell is a Black Sabbath album that I would consider like what you'd call a rejuvenation album. It's when a band's been going for a while, and although the Ozzy stuff is awesome, but after a while, this sort of maybe needed new life breathed into the band a bit. And although I'm such a fan, I like all Sabbath. I like Never Say Die and Technical Ecstasy and all that. And yeah, I like Technical Ecstasy. I said it. But yeah, I like all that Sabbath stuff nonetheless. But it could be considered a rejuvenation album because Heaven and Hell did breathe new life into the band. They had this new singer, and it really worked well. Dio's vocals worked well with Sabbath's music. and they then recorded a couple more albums. Then they recorded a live album called Live Evil, and there were some problems in mixing the album, and there was some tension between Tony and Dio, and as a result, because of some things with the sound engineer, some other like kind of stupid reasons, Dio ended up leaving, and that's a shame. But Dio did go on to a very successful solo project and put out some more awesome albums. Though I don't like all the Dio albums, there is some real awesome material there. So, but yeah, I kind of want to now pull it back a bit because I got to the 80s. Still want to talk a bit more about the 70s. So much hard rock and heavy metal came out at that time. And the next band I want to talk about is Kiss. You can't really do a video on the history of hard rock and heavy metal without mentioning Kiss. Now, Kiss tends to be a love them or hate them kind of band. And whether you love them or whether you hate them, you have to admire how well they set that whole thing up, because they really set that up very well. And Paul Stanley in his biography says that it's because of they set it up so well because of their manager, Bill Aucoin. That Bill Aucoin really knew how to market the band based on their image, based on the direction they wanted to go on, based on the merchandising. He really knew how to market Kiss. And, Gene Simmons, later claimed to be a great businessman, but at that time, it was actually Bill Aucoin that really set the whole thing up. Gene Simmons would sort of, gain more business savvy later on, but in the early 70s, like I said, Bill Aucoin. Then they put out Kiss Alive. Now, Kiss Alive was what really popularized the band. It was, this, started the whole, live album craze of the 70s. It's one of the great 1970s live albums. It really is. There are a lot of great 1970s live albums. But Kiss pretty much started that with Alive. And that is really the album that I would say really got me into Kiss, was listening to Alive and just how great the whole thing sounded. And, later on you hear, I guess, the whole thing is not entirely live, but doesn't matter. To me, it's still a great album nonetheless. And then after that, they put out Destroyer. That catapulted Kiss into, further fame, because they then, even did their own rock movie, Kiss Meet the Phantom of the Park, which I have seen, and, I think it's, for what it is, I'd have to say, it is, pretty good. Does kind of seem a little like an episode of Scooby-Doo in a way, but, it's definitely, if you like nostalgia, like I do and all that, it's definitely something to check out for sure. But, so, yeah, then, Kiss pretty much, by the late 70s, had become like the #1 band in the world. For about 3 years, they were the #1 band in the world, and that I can actually remember when they were famous the first time in the late 70s. Kiss is, I believe, the first hard rock band I had ever, heard about. My next door neighbor actually had all the Kiss dolls and whatnot, and I remember seeing it. I don't remember what I thought of it when I saw them, but I do remember seeing, the Kiss dolls and kind of wondering what all that was about and whatnot. But, so yeah, Kiss, obviously a huge band. As they got big, I believe it was Neil Bogart from their record label, Casablanca Records, actually asked Kiss if they would go out and, kind of scout out more talent and more bands, and that's exactly, what Kiss did. They then were in a club and they heard a band called Pentagram, and they were interested in signing Pentagram to to Casablanca. So apparently they went over to one of the members' houses and listen to them play. And they did like the songs. I know Paul really liked a song called Starlight Lady that he wanted to buy from the band and put it on Destroyer. They wouldn't sell it, so kind of fell apart. Also, I guess the guys in Kiss didn't really care for the look of the band. You know, just kind of felt like the band needed, you know, a look, and that a look would be important, and they kind of didn't like Pentagram's look. So the whole deal of getting them on Casablanca kind of fell